Imagine you're a merchant in 17th century Jamaica. You're sitting at this heavy wooden desk, right? And you're drafting a seemingly routine business letter to a shipping agent in Amsterdam.
Just a standard Tuesday.
Right, a totally normal Tuesday. But you dip your quill, knowing that writing the wrong word, like even just a subtle misstep in how you refer to a family member or a trade route, it won't just cost you your shipping assets.
No, it'll cost you everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the colonial authorities intercept this letter, that single word will get you and your entire family burned at the stake by the Inquisition.
Yeah, the stakes literally could not be higher.
And you have no digital encryption, you have no, invisible ink. Your only protection is to write your deepest secrets in plain sight, using an invisible vault made entirely out of the machinery of the alphabet. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring this really fascinating archival historical analysis. It's titled The Alchemist's Mirror, Crypto-Judaism and the Reversed Alphabet.
It is such a brilliant paper.
It really is. And our mission today is to figure out how a simple reversed alphabet creates this direct hidden line connecting ancient biblical scribes, underground merchants in the Caribbean, and, of all things, the legendary Knights Templar.
Yeah, we're looking at history not just through the documents people left behind, but through the deliberate, calculated ways they warped language to keep their secrets breathing. It's an incredible journey into the psychology of survival.
I love that imagery, warping language to let a secret breathe. But before we get into the Caribbean merchants and the medieval knights, we really have to understand the machinery of this invisible vault. Like, what exactly is this reversed alphabet, and how does it work mechanically?
Well, the mechanism we're analyzing is a cipher known as Atbash. And at its core, it's a mathematical symmetric reflection of the Hebrew alphabet.
No.
So it basically takes a linear sequence of letters and folds it back on itself to create this closed, mirrored loop.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when you say symmetric reflection, I'm trying to picture the mechanics in my head. If we were using the English alphabet, we wouldn't just be writing like A through M on a piece of paper and then writing N through Z backward below it, right?
No. A better way to visualize the mechanics is to imagine taking a single long strip of paper. You have the English alphabet written in a straight line from A to Z. Now fold that paper perfectly in half.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so A touches Z, they become a pair. The second letter B touches the second to last letter Y.
Got it. And C touches X and so on.
Exactly, all the way down the line until the middle letters meet. So in the Hebrew alphabet, the first letter is Aleph and the last letter is Tav.
So Aleph swaps with Tav.
Right. And the second letter is Beit and the second to last is Shin. So Beit becomes Shin, hence the name of the cipher, actually. Atbash. Atbash.
Oh, wow. That is beautifully simple.
It really is.
You don't need a decoder ring or some translation manual hidden under your floorboards. You just need to hold the alphabet in your head. But, where does a system like this even originate? Because it feels almost too elegant for a primitive cryptograph.
Well, its origins are ancient, born out of absolute tactical necessity during periods of intense geopolitical upheaval.
Like when?
So the most famous early application is found in the biblical book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was writing during the rise of the Babylonian Empire.
Okay. A pretty dangerous time to be a critic.
Incredibly dangerous. If you were a dissident prophet or a scribe composing texts that heavily criticized Babylon, writing the raw, actual name of the empire, which is Babel, was essentially the death warrant if your scrolls were intercepted by imperial authorities.
Yeah, they're not going to take kindly to that.
Not at all. So Jeremiah deploys the Atbash cipher. He takes the Hebrew consonants for Babel, which are bet, lamed, and runs them through the mirror.
Okay, so following that folded paper analogy we just talked about, bet is the second letter, so it swaps with shin, the second to last.
Yeah.
And then another bet becomes another shin.
Exactly.
And lamed, which sits right in the middle of the Hebrew alphabet. Yeah. That swaps with its counterpart, kaf.
Yes. Leaving the scribe with the word sheshak.
Sheshak.
Yeah. To a Babylonian inspector or just an uninitiated reader, sheshak might look like an obscure geographic reference or simply a nonsense word.
Right. It draws zero suspicion.
But to the intended initiated reader who possesses the mental key, it decodes instantly back to Babel.
That is wild. The alphabet becomes a completely invisible safe. You are literally locking the true meaning of the text inside the structure of the letters themselves.
And, over the centuries, rabbinic scholars recognized the immense potential of that invisible safe. They didn't just view Atbash as a tactical trick for dodging imperial censors.
Even a bit further.
Much further, they integrated it into their deep analytical frameworks, specifically within practices like gematria.
Which is the numbering system, right?
Right, the mystical tradition of assigning numerical values to letters to uncover hidden connections. And also midrash, which is the ancient scholarly tradition of interpreting and finding layers of meaning between the lines of biblical texts.
So instead of just using it to hide from a physical enemy with swords, they start using it to explore theology.
Exactly. The philosophy behind it shifted. Scholars began to believe that the language itself held hidden dualities, and Atbash was the mechanical key to unlocking the shadow side of a word.
Wow.
Yeah, flipping the alphabet became a way to pull a deeper layer of divine architecture out of the text.
Yeah.
Just revealing how opposing concepts were mathematically tethered together in the very fabric of Hebrew.
That's incredibly profound. But, history has a funny way of forcing philosophy back into the realm of survival. This idea of language as an invisible safe didn't stay in the tranquil study halls of scholars forever. It was forced back underground centuries later when a new apparatus of terror emerged.
Yes.
And to understand this, we have to look at the massive cultural fracture of 1492, which is the Sephardic split.
Right, so 1492 was the year of the Alhambra Decree, the expulsion of Jews from Spain, which was soon followed by forced conversions and expulsions in Portugal.
Just a horrific time.
Completely destabilizing. The entire Sephardic world was cleaved in two. Those who managed to flee east into the safety of the Ottoman Empire, or eventually to places like Amsterdam, they were able to shed the Christian identities they had been forced to adopt.
They could reclaim their Hebrew names openly.
Yes, and practice their faith without fear of the state.
But the people who sailed west into the Spanish and Portuguese colonies of the New World, places like Lima, Mexico City, and Cartagena, they were basically walking into a trap.
A massive trap. They had to live incredibly dangerous double lives as nuevos cristianos, or new Christians. We know them historically as conversos, or crypto-Jews.
And their daily reality was defined by just an overarching paranoia, right? I mean, on the outside, they had names like Gorns or Rodriguez. They attended Mass. They integrated into colonial society. And they were upstanding Catholic citizens on paper.
But internally, within their underground networks, they were desperately trying to hold on to their heritage. I mean, they needed to track their lineages, verify who belonged to the priestly families, manage communal funds, and keep supply lines open across the Atlantic.
Right, and the source text mentions that initially some of these families tried to use a system called notaricon. How did that work?
So notaricon is an acronymic shorthand. It was an attempt to hide titles within seemingly standard surnames.
Oh, clever.
Right. So if your family was of the priestly class, the Kohanim, you might adopt the surname Katz. To the uninitiated, Katz sounds perfectly normal. But to an insider, KTs is an acronym for Kohen Tzedek, which means righteous priest.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Another example is the name Sigel, which stands for Sigan Leviah, meaning assistant to the Levites.
So it's basically creating a surname that acts as a hidden badge of honor.
It was very clever, but the Inquisition in the New World colonies was ruthless and highly observant and deeply bureaucratic.
They weren't missing a trick.
No. They weren't just searching homes for obvious contraband, like Hebrew Bibles. They were actively hunting for any mundane habit of, quote-unquote, Judaizing.
Like what? What are we talking about?
They scrutinized whether you abstained from eating pork, or if you happened to change your bed linens on a Friday afternoon before the Jewish Sabbath.
Wait, really? Changing your sheets on the wrong day of the week could put you in an interrogation room.
Absolutely. The inquisitors eventually grew smart to the notaricon system, too. Relying on recognizable acronyms like CATS or SIGAL became far too risky.
Because the Holy Office knew what those names signified.
Exactly. The conversos needed a system of communication that left absolutely zero physical footprint.
Well, wait, I have a pushback here. If these converso families are living in Mexico City or Cartagena for 3 or 4 generations, living entirely under the guise of Catholicism, they aren't going to Hebrew school.
Right, they aren't.
They are entirely cut off from formal religious education. So how are they pulling off a complex Hebrew cipher if they've lost the ability to read flowing Hebrew texts altogether?
Well, what's fascinating here is that while they lost the fluent conversational grasp of the language, they retained the alphabet itself as a fundamental symbolic system.
Just the letters.
Yes. It was the absolute basic structure of their mysticism, passed down orally from parent to child. Atbash requires 0 advanced books. You don't need a physical key that an inquisitor can find hidden in your ledger.
Well,
the matrix is entirely in your head.
okay, so going back to our merchant in Jamaica drafting a letter to Amsterdam,
Yeah.
if they are writing the letter in standard 17th century Spanish or Portuguese, how are they applying a Hebrew cipher to a Romance language?
They utilized a phonetic adaptation of Atbash. The merchant would write the bulk of the business correspondence in standard Spanish, but when it came to key names, theological indicators, or specific shipping routes that needed to be protected.
Which is dangerous stuff.
Exactly. They would mentally map the Spanish consonants to their Hebrew equivalents. They would run the Atbash transformation in their mind, swapping the first letter for the last, the second for the second to last, and then write down the resulting mirrored consonants using Romanized Spanish letters.
So to the Spanish censor inspecting the mail in Veracruz, the word just looks like a typo, or an indigenous dialect, or a completely mundane trade term.
Exactly. But the recipient in Amsterdam, holding the other half of the mental mirror, reads the phonetic gibberish, runs it back through the Atbash cipher, and suddenly has the exact coordinates of an escape route to a safe haven like Curacao.
Or the true lineage of a prominent family.
Yes. It allowed them to form an invisible, secure web across the Atlantic Ocean, protecting both their spiritual identities and their physical assets.
And the genius of it is that the inquisitors were looking for the safe itself.
Yeah.
They were looking for physical proof of heresy. They never realized the safe was the language they were reading.
Right, this idea of language as a dual-purpose vehicle, mundane on the surface, heretical underneath, it was the ultimate survival mechanism.
But here's the thing. This mechanism of a double-blind linguistic tactic, it didn't actually start with the Inquisition in the New World. The Church had encountered this exact same invisible safe centuries earlier, though they didn't realize it at the time.
No, they had no idea.
And to see it, we have to pivot to a much older, darker historical mystery from the Middle Ages. We have to look at the Knights Templar.
Ah, the Templar trials. I mean, they represent one of the most bizarre chapters in medieval history.
Set the scene for us.
The date is Friday the 13th in the year 1307. King Philip V of France was massively in debt to the Knights Templar, which had grown into an immensely wealthy and powerful Christian military order.
Right.
So, desperate to liquidate those debts and seize their assets, Philip launched a highly coordinated surprise raid across France, arresting the Templars en masse.
And he has the Inquisition torture the knights to extract confessions of heresy, right? Which gives him the religious justification to destroy the order.
Yes.
And under torture, the Templars confess to something totally bewildering. They confess that they don't just worship Jesus, they worship a severed head or a bizarre idol named Baphomet.
Right. And for centuries, the name Baphomet baffled historians. It didn't correspond to any known demonology or pagan deity. Was it a complete fabrication by the interrogators to justify executing the knights? Nobody knew.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. In the 20th century, a British biblical scholar and Dead Sea Scrolls translator named Dr. Hugh Schonfield decided to look at the Baphomet problem. But he looked at it through the lens of ancient Jewish cryptography.
Which is a brilliant angle.
It really is. He hypothesized that the Templars, having spent immense time in the Levant during the Crusades, had absorbed mystical cryptographic practices from the local Kabbalists and Sufi mystics.
Yes, and Schonfield made a brilliant analytical leap here. He stripped the bizarre word Baphomet down to its core phonetic sounds.
Right, because in Hebrew, words are primarily written using only consonants. The vowels are fluid and often implied.
Exactly. So if you take the European word Baphomet and spell it out phonetically using Hebrew consonants, you get 5 specific letters: bet, pe, vav, mem, and tav.
Okay, let's walk those 5 letters through the Atbash mirror we established earlier.
Let's do it.
The first letter of Baphomet is bet, which is the second letter of the alphabet. In the mirror, bet swaps with.
Shin.
Right. The second letter is pe. Its mirror counterpart is
Vav.
okay. The third letter is vav, so it naturally mirrors back to pe.
Yep.
The fourth letter is mem. In the folded alphabet, mem touches.
Yud.
Yud. And the fifth letter is tav, the very last letter of the alphabet, which mirrors back to aleph, the first letter.
So we take the phonetic Hebrew spelling of Baphomet, bet, pe, vav, mem, tav, and it transforms mathematically into shin, vav, pe, yud, aleph.
And if you sound out those mirrored letters, shin, vav, pe, yud,
Hey.
aleph, it spells out Sophia, or as we know it in the West,
Sophia.
Sophia, the Greek word for divine wisdom.
It's incredible.
It's like the word Baphomet is a linguistic Russian nesting doll.
Yeah.
You crack open this terrifying, demonic-sounding outer shell that the Inquisition is obsessed with, and inside you find a completely different, paradigm-shifting theology.
Because in Gnostic traditions, Sophia isn't just a vocabulary word. It is the personification of divine, higher intellect and spiritual truth.
Right.
It completely shifts the narrative of the Templar trials. It suggests that Atbash had been elevated from a simple administrative tool into a mathematical reliquary. The Templars were using it to lock away esoteric heretical philosophy from the rigid dogma of the medieval church.
They weren't worshiping a severed demon head?
Though they were guarding a philosophical concept of divine wisdom.
Man, as much as my mind is genuinely blown by that translation, I do have to ask the obvious question.
Go for it.
Does this actually hold up? Like, are we absolutely sure King Philip's royal propagandists didn't just recycle standard 14th century xenophobia? Because secular historians like Peter Partner argue that Baphomet is nothing more than an old French dialect corruption of the name Muhammad, meaning Muhammad, the prophet of Islam.
Yeah, and Partner's counter-argument carries significant historical weight. You really have to remember the context of the era. The Crusaders had spent over a century fighting in the Middle East.
Right.
A very standard, albeit entirely false, xenophobic trope that Europeans leveled against Muslims at the time was that they were idolaters who worshipped golden statues of Muhammad.
Which is completely contrary to Islamic theology, obviously.
Right, completely false, but it was a popular European myth. There is even evidence in the trial transcripts where tortured Templar prisoners confessed to kissing the feet of this idol and shouting words like Yalla.
Which is clearly a corruption of the Arabic word Allah.
Yes.
Okay, but if Baphomet is just a French peasant mispronunciation of Muhammad, doesn't that mean the whole Atbash connection to Sophia is just a massive, unbelievable historical coincidence? Like, you're telling me a French corruption of an Arabic name just happens to decode through a Hebrew cipher into a Greek word for wisdom?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the Levant during the Crusades, it explains exactly how this linguistic leap is possible and why it doesn't have to be a coincidence at all.
Okay, how so?
The Levant wasn't a quarantined military zone. It was a chaotic, porous melting pot of ideas. You had Christian military orders, Sufi mystics, and Jewish Kabbalists all occupying and interacting in the same small strip of land.
So languages and esoteric concepts were bleeding into one another constantly.
Exactly. So let's assume secular historians are right, and Baphomet did originate simply as a crude phonetic corruption of Muhammad by common soldiers. An inner circle of educated Templar initiates who had interacted with local scholars and learned Kabbalistic letter shifts like Atbash. They could look at that culturally prevalent corrupted street word and realize its phonetic potential.
Oh, I see.
Right. They map out the consonants of Baphomet in Hebrew, run it through the Atbash cipher, and realize that mathematically it perfectly conceals the word Sophia.
Oh, wow. So they didn't invent the word Baphomet. They adopted the existing slur because it was the perfect cover.
Exactly. This creates what cryptographers call a double-blind security system. It satisfies the surface-level suspicion of the interrogator.
Because to an outsider or a torturer, the word Baphomet just sounds like a crude insult or a corrupted foreign name.
Yes. It gives the Inquisition exactly what they expect to hear, evidence that the knights had gone native and betrayed Christianity for a demonic foreign idol.
But to an initiate holding the Atbash key, that exact same word decodes into an entirely different, hidden philosophical system. The interrogator thinks they've cracked the conspiracy, completely unaware that the word they are recording in their trial transcript is actually a mathematical vault holding a Gnostic secret.
And that is the ultimate protection. You hide your deepest truth inside a word that your enemy already thinks they understand. And, this brings us right back to the Sephardic conversos in the New World.
It's the exact same survival mechanism.
The new Christians survived the Inquisition by learning how to live inside words that had two completely different meanings. To the Spanish governor in Cartagena, you are a pious Catholic named Garcia. You attend Mass, your name is on the tax register, and everything looks perfectly normal on the surface.
You give the state exactly what it expects to see.
Yes, but on the inside, utilizing the inverted alphabets of your heritage, your true identity, your lineage, your faith, it remains perfectly preserved, untouched by the fires of the Inquisition.
Because the Inquisitors were looking for physical ledgers and hidden scrolls. They never realized they were staring at the cipher every single time they read a letter.
Right. When we look at this massive historical tapestry, from the prophet Jeremiah dodging the Babylonian Empire, to the conversos protecting their families in Jamaica, to the Knights Templar guarding Gnostic wisdom in medieval France, we see that the ultimate purpose of Atbash was never simply to destroy or obscure a name.
No.
It was to build a vault out of the alphabet.
So what does this all mean? I think it means that human beings have an innate, desperate need to protect their most sacred truths. Atbash was a way of ensuring that no matter how far a community was scattered across the ocean, no matter how intensely they were persecuted or monitored by the state, the original truth was never lost.
It was always just a reflection away, waiting patiently for someone who knew how to hold up the mirror. The resilience of the human mind and its ability to adapt the basic tools of communication is really the greatest encryption system we have.
It's profoundly humbling when you think about it. Today, we rely on 256-bit digital encryption, two-factor authentication, biometric scanners, all of it just to protect our bank accounts and our private messages. We assume secrecy requires massive technological infrastructure.
Yeah, servers and firewalls.
Right. But for centuries, people protected their lives, their families, and their deepest philosophical beliefs using nothing but the sheer machinery of language. Which leaves me with one final thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over long after we wrap up today's deep dive.
I love this part.
If ancient communities could use a simple mathematical alphabetical mirror to hide paradigm-shifting theology in plain sight, what seemingly ordinary, mundane words in our historical records today, or even in the modern institutions around us, are actually double-blind ciphers, just waiting for the right person to flip them.
It makes you wonder.
It really does. Keep looking for the invisible vaults. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.